Καλησπέρα, είμαι ο Παναγιώτης Μένεγος, δημοσιογράφος και ραδιοφωνικός παραγωγός. Θα είμαι ο συντονιστής της σημερινής εκδήλωσης, η οποία έρχεται 3 εβδομάδες ακριβώς μετά τα όσα συνέβησαν το απόγευμα της 25ης Μαΐου στη Μινεάπολη των ΗΠΑ. Τότε που ο 46χρονος George Floyd έπεσε άοπλος, νεκρός, στα χέρια των αστυνομικών που πήγαν να τον συλλάβουν μετά από μια υπόθεση υποτιθέμενης πλαστογραφίας και του προκάλεσαν την ασφυξία που τον έκανε να καταλήξει στα χέρια τους. Αυτό συνέβη πριν από 3 εβδομάδες στην Μινεάπολη. Δεν είναι όμως το τελευταίο περιστατικό ανάλογο στις ΗΠΑ. Πριν από 3-24 ώρα, ο 27χρονος Richard Brooks έπεσε νεκρός από πυρά αστυνομικού, με τον οποίο είχε πριν διαπληκτιστεί, του είχε αφαιρέσει το τέιζερ από έναν συνάδελφό του, στο πάρκινγκ μιας γνωστής αλυσίδας ταχυφαγείου στις ΗΠΑ, στην Ατλάντα συγκεκριμένα, την περασμένη Παρασκευή. Ο τίτλος σημερινής εκδήλωσης είναι «Ακούμε τη φωνή των αμερικάνικων δρόμων» και πραγματικά είναι χρήσιμο να ακούσουμε τη φωνή τους, να πάρουμε ένα κλίμα, να πάρουμε μερικές εικόνες από όσα συμβαίνουν στις ΗΠΑ, οι οποίες περνάνε μια από τις πιο δύσκολες περιόδους της νεότερης ιστορίας τους. Έχουν δεχτεί ένα συντριπτικά ισχυρό χτύπημα από την πανδημία και παράλληλα η εξέγερση που ακολούθησε τη δολοφονία Floyd έχει αποτελέσει και πρώτη ύλη για όσους προωθούν τον διχασμό μέσα στην αμερικάνικη κοινωνία. Είναι πολύ δύσκολο εμείς από μακριά να βάλουμε τις σκέψεις μας σε μια τάξη, παρακολουθώντας όσα γίνονται στις ΗΠΑ. Είναι και ακόμα δυσκολότερο να διαχωρίσουμε τις σκέψεις από τα συναισθήματα. Σε αυτές τις περιπτώσεις, ο ασφαλέστερος τρόπος για να κρατηθείς στο μονοπάτι της ψυχραιμίας είναι οι αριθμοί. Και οι αριθμοί στην υπόθεση των φυλετικών διακρίσεων στις ΗΠΑ είναι αμήλικτοι. Είναι μερικώς, εντελώς, απόλυτα για κάποιους αποκαρδιωτικοί. Πάμε να δούμε μερικούς. Οι Αφροαμερικανοί αποτελούν το 13% του πληθυσμού των ΗΠΑ. 4 στους 10 αστέγους όμως προέρχονται από την κοινότητά τους. Οι Αφροαμερικανοί, ξαναλέω, αποτελούν το 13% του πληθυσμού των ΗΠΑ. Όμως 1 στους 4 που έχουν πεθάνει από τον κορονοϊό ανήκει στην κοινότητά τους. Για τους Αφροαμερικανούς είναι 2,5 φορές περισσότερο πιθανό να σκοτωθούν από πυρά αστυνομικών σε σχέση με τους λευκούς, παρότι οι λευκοί είναι σχεδόν 4,5 φορές περισσότεροι. Αποτελούν το 60% του πληθυσμού έναντι των Αφροαμερικανών που αποτελούν το 13%, όπως λέω για μία ακόμα φορά. Στις ΗΠΑ εκτείουν αυτή τη στιγμή ποινή φυλάκισης γύρω στα 2,3 εκατομμύρια άνθρωποι. Για να καταλάβετε πόσο μεγάλη βιομηχανία είναι το σωτηρονιστικό σύστημα στις ΗΠΑ, αρκεί να πω ότι ο αριθμός αυτός είναι 14,5 φορές περισσότερος από την Ιαπωνία, 6 φορές μεγαλύτερος από τον Καναδά, 8 φορές περισσότερος από την Ελλάδα. Παρ' όλα αυτά όμως το ποσοστό λευκών και Αφροαμερικανών είναι το ίδιο. Δηλαδή αυτό πρακτικά σημαίνει ότι για κάθε έναν λευκό που μπαίνει φυλακή είναι ήδη μέσα 4,5 Αφροαμερικανοί. 56 χρόνια μετά το Civil Rights Act του 1964, που τότε αποτέλεσε κάτι ριζοσπαστικό για την εξάλληψη των φυλετικών διακρίσεων, σήμερα το μέσο εισόδημα ενός νοικοκυριού λευκών στις ΗΠΑ είναι 1,7 φορές μεγαλύτερο από ότι ενός νοικοκυριού Αφροαμερικανών. 70 έναντι 41.000 δολαρίων. Το ποσοστό της ανεργίας είναι μεγαλύτερο στην Αφροαμερικανική κοινότητα, 6,5% έναντι 3,9% των λευκών, ενώ την ίδια στιγμή 1 στους 13 Αφροαμερικανούς έχει στερηθεί τα πολιτικά του δικαιώματα και δεν μπορεί να ψηφίσει επειδή έχει καταδικαστεί για κάποιο κακούργημα. Υπάρχουν πολλά περισσότερα νούμερα, αλλά πιθανολογώ ότι ίσως ήδη μπορεί να σας έχω κουράσει και δεν θέλω να σας πω περισσότερα. Το συμπέρασμα είναι απλό και δεν χρειάζεται κανείς να επιστρατεύσει σύνθετες αναλυτικές ικανότητες. Ο ρατσισμός στις ΗΠΑ είναι συστημικός και παράλληλα και ενδυμικός, ανατρέχοντας κανείς την ιστορία τους από το 1776 έως σήμερα. Υπάρχει κι άλλο ένα νούμερο. Είναι το 8.836. Αυτά είναι τα χιλιόμετρα, αυτή είναι η απόσταση μεταξύ της Αθήνας και λίγο πολύ όλων των ελληνικών πόλεων από τη Μινεόπολη. Τι μπορούμε λοιπόν εμείς να κάνουμε, παρακολουθώντας από μια τόσο μεγάλη απόσταση όσα συμβαίνουν στην άλλη άκρη του Ατλαντικού? Τα παρακολουθούμε με ενδιαφέρον, τα παρακολουθούμε με οργή, τα παρακολουθούμε ενίοτε και με δέος, βλέποντας όλο αυτό το ξέσπασμα των Αφροαμερικανών και προσφέρουμε την αλληλεγγύη μας μέσα από κάποιες συζητήσιμες ενέργειες, μέσα από κάποιες συζητήσιμες στρατηγικές στα social media. Συνήθως αυτές τις περιπτώσεις είναι η pop κουλτούρα η οποία δίνει τον τρόπο. Αυτές τις μέρες, παραδείγματος χάρη, μπορούμε να δούμε την καινούρια, πάντα πολιτικά φορτισμένη και φιλετικά φορτισμένη ταινία του Spike Lee, τον The Five Bloods, ή να ακούσουμε ένα άλμπουμ του αμερικάνικου ραπ συγκροτήματος, τον And the Jules, που λίγο πολύ αποτελεί λίγο το soundtrack της εξέγερσης των ημερών και μας δίνει λίγο και τη θερμοκρασία που επικρατεί στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες Αμερικής. Όμως και πάλι, ακόμα και έτσι παρατηρούμε, δεν είμαστε σε θέση να βιώσουμε τον ρατσισμό. Και μερικές φορές, κάνοντας και κάποιες επικίνδυνες, κατά κανόνα, αναγωγές στα δικά μας πράγματα, κινδυνεύουμε να πέσουμε στον κίνδυνο του white-splaining, δηλαδή του να μιλάμε εμείς ως λευκοί προνομιούχοι για λογαριασμό των καταπιεσμένων Αφροαμερικανών. Το white-splaining παραμονεύει σε αυτές τις περιπτώσεις και δυστυχώς το έχουμε δει να συμβαίνει πολύ αυτές τις 3 εβδομάδες. Αυτό λοιπόν που μπορούμε να κάνουμε, εκτός από το να παρατηρήσουμε ή να επιστρατεύσουμε κάτι από τις προηγούμενες στρατηγικές, είναι να ακούσουμε. Και οι σημερινοί ομιλητές είναι 2 εξαιρετικές πηγές πληροφόρησης. So I'm really honored to introduce Mrs. Marion Gray-Hopkins and Mr. Ernest Coverson. Mrs. Gray-Hopkins began her work as an activist in the movement for social justice, civil liberties, and police accountability, following the killing of her 19-year-old son, Gary Hopkins Jr., in November 1999 by 2 police officers. He was totally unarmed. Mr. Coverson serves as the End-Gun Violence Campaign Manager for Amnesty International USA. He works to eradicate all forms of gun violence, plaguing the US, especially in Black and Brown communities. This is our 2 main speakers tonight. Αλλά πριν, και με συγχωρείτε για αυτή την εναλλαγή ανάμεσα στις γλώσσες, προσπαθούμε να το κάνουμε όσο πιο άνετο για σας που μας παρακολουθείτε από το γραφείο, από το σπίτι σας ή ακόμα και από το κινητό σας. Θα ήθελα να δώσω τον λόγο στον Γαβρίλη Σαρκεραρίδη, τον Διευθυντή του Ελληνικού Τμήματος της Διεθνούς Αμνηστίας, για έναν σύντομο χαιρετισμό πριν η κυρία Hopkins και ο κύριος Coverson πάρουν τον λόγο. Αυτά από μένα. Γαβρίλ, ο λόγος σε εσένα.
Σε ευχαριστώ πολύ, Παναγιώτη. Θα είναι πραγματικά εξαιρετικά σύντομος ο χαιρετισμός, γιατί αυτό που έχει ενδιαφέρον στη σημερινή συζήτηση είναι να ακούσουμε τους 2 φίλους μας από τις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες, οι οποίοι έχουν πολλά να μοιραστούν μαζί μας και εμείς έχουμε να μάθουμε πολλά. Γιατί η πραγματικότητα είναι ότι βομβαρδιζόμαστε τον τελευταίο καιρό διαρκώς από ειδήσεις σχετικά με το τι συμβαίνει στην Αμερική. Το βλέπουμε μέσα από τα mainstream media, το βλέπουμε μέσα από αναρτήσεις που γίνονται πιο κινηματικής προέλευσης. Αυτό όμως που νομίζουμε, και αυτός ήταν ο λόγος πως Διεθνής Αμνηστία θέλαμε να οργανώσουμε μια τέτοια κουβέντα, είναι να δώσουμε φωνή στους ίδιους τους ανθρώπους, οι οποίοι είναι στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες, οι οποίοι είναι ενεργοί στο κίνημα, όπως το θέλει να το πει ο καθένας, είτε Black Lives Matter, είτε το κίνημα για την κοινωνική δικαιοσύνη, το κίνημα ενάντια στο ρατσισμό, το κίνημα ενάντια στην αστυνομική βία και αυθαιρεσία, έτσι ώστε να μπορέσουμε πραγματικά να μάθουμε κι εμείς μέσα από τις προσωπικές τους εμπειρίες. Είμαστε πραγματικά πολύ χαρούμενοι που έχουμε 2 εξαιρετικούς ομιλητές, οι οποίοι έχουν μακρά ιστορία μέσα στο κίνημα για τα δικαιώματα της μαύρης κοινότητας στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες. Αυτό που θέλω να πω είναι ότι μπορείτε να υπογράψετε όσοι και όσες θέλετε την έκκληση της Διεθνούς Αμνηστίας, η οποία σε λίγο θα ανέβει στο chat του Facebook, στα σχόλια μάλλον του Facebook, έτσι ώστε και ο καθένας και κάθε μία από εμάς να βάλει ένα μικρό λιθαράκι έστω από αυτή τη μακρινή απόσταση που βρισκόμαστε από τις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες και να στείλει ένα σαφές μήνυμα προς την κυβέρνηση Τραμπ σχετικά με τη σημασία που υπάρχει για να προσπίσουμε τα ανθρώπινα δικαιώματα στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες. Και αυτό που θέλω να πω επίσης είναι ότι όσοι και όσες από εσάς ενδιαφέρονται, εμείς από την πλευρά μας ως Ελληνικό Τμήμα της Διεθνούς Αμνηστίας διαρκώς ανατροφοδοτούμε με ειδήσεις μέσα από τα social media μας και μέσα από το site μας σχετικά με γεγονότα και που συμβαίνουν στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες, είτε αυτά έχουν να κάνουν με κινητοποιήσεις, είτε έχουν να κάνουν με εξελίξεις στο θεσμικό επίπεδο, γιατί υπάρχουν και αυτές και υπάρχει μια ισχυρή πίεση και στο επίπεδο της Βουλής των Αντιπροσώπων και στο επίπεδο της Γερουσίας για να προωθηθούν νόμοι οι οποίοι θα αλλάζουν στο βαθμό που γίνεται αυτό πρακτικές και μεθοδολογίες της αστυνομίας και θα την κάνουν να λογοδοτήσει. Γνωρίζουμε φυσικά ότι δεν αρκούν οι αλλαγές στο θεσμικό επίπεδο. Γνωρίζουμε ότι πλέον έχουμε να κάνουμε μια βαθιά εμπεδωμένη, αν θέλετε, κουλτούρα καταπάτησης των δικαιωμάτων της μαύρης κοινότητας και κάτι τέτοιο αλλάζει με κοινωνική κινητοποίηση, αλλάζει μέσα από συλλογικές διαδικασίες, αλλάζει μέσα από ένα μαζικό κίνημα το οποίο θα βρίσκει όμως τον τρόπο να προωθεί τις συστημικές αλλαγές που απαιτούνται σε αυτό το επίπεδο. Καλή θέαση από όλους και από όλες. Σας ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Όποιος θέλει, επαναλαμβάνω, μπορεί να υπογράψει και την έκκληση της Διεθνούς Αμνηστίας ως μια πρώτη κίνηση προς αυτή την κατεύθυνση. Παναγιώτη, δικός σου ο λόγος.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriel. So, Mr. Coverson, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks for everyone that's tuned in this evening. So wanted to start with just going over some history of how we got here and the police relationship within the Black community here in America. And then go into our current situation and then what Amnesty is asking for coming out of this, right? And so we look at police and the history of police in the country, and specifically with the Black community here. You know, policing started really in the slave times as slave catchers, right? You had individuals at that time, white men, that were commissioned to catch runaway slaves that was running and fighting for their freedom. And so they would go out and whatever means necessary to bring those slaves back to their quote masters, they took, and they did. And so over time that began the trend of what police are. And so as we moved and evolved into, you know, after slavery was abolished, and we became this police force. So there's always been this adversarial relationship between police force and the African American community. And so it continued on, as many of you have probably seen footage from the civil rights moments and times of the 50s and 60s and early 70s, where the police were used to push back protesters, was used to put fear into communities, put fear into individuals that were fighting for their right to just be a human. Here in the country. And so they use dogs, they use water hoses. They did, again, any means necessary to push their agenda and to stop the agenda of the Black community here in the country. And so as we continue to move forward, we get into now 2020, the 2000s, and we see the police force is still being used to stop individuals in what they do and being able to fight for their rights, fight to be alive, et cetera, and still policing communities and overwhelmingly policing Black and brown communities. I mean, using that lethal force now that they've taken a step further, you know, from where they were. We're using, you know, other facets of force, but now getting to lethal force where individuals are dying from a traffic stop. Individuals are dying from just having simple interactions with police. And so we are continuously to fight and see that where we are. You know, luckily, we have the invention of cell phones and cell phone cameras that have came about and now is providing that video footage that allows these stories that many folks, many Black men and women have been telling over the centuries, have been telling these stories that people never believed, right? They never believed that police could do this to individuals. They never believed that the police would look at someone just because they're Black, look at them different than they would if they was a white individual. And so with the invention of cell phones and cameras, we have been able to document these activities, been able to show the world, as we're here now having this conversation in Greece, that we could show the world that this is not a figment of our imagination. This is not someone that didn't want to get arrested, that provided some fear in another person's heart that they had to now turn around and shoot this individual to stop them from doing whatever they was doing. And so we have been able to document and show everyone that this is going on and that these police forces are stepping out of bounds. You know, they are, instead of serving and protecting, they are using lethal force as their first means versus having a conversation, building relationships, etc. with communities. They are automatically going to lethal force. They're automatically stepping out there and taking the law in their own hands and killing individuals for simple stops, for individuals that are unarmed. If you're a trained professional with a gun, with a taser, etc., and an individual that is non-trained, that is unarmed, how is that person all of a sudden a threat to you as a trained individual? You look at individuals that are doctors that are trained. You can't go in and now all of a sudden do an operation because they're going to say you need training. You need to be trained in that. And they won't give over a scalpel to that individual. And so that same concept of being trained has to come into effect with these police officers when they are going to lethal force as their first response versus de-escalating a situation, versus having a conversation with individuals and being able to bring that situation under control. And so we see that as our trajectory of police with the African American, the Black community here in America, as we have continued to have to be on guard. Many communities unfortunately don't see them as officer friendly, as part of that community. We see them as adversarial. And so, it became a big push in 2014 after Mike Brown. Remember, people may remember Mike Brown's killing by police in Ferguson. And that was one of the more recent huge protest situations that took place because of police use of force. And Amnesty at that time did a report. Amnesty USA did a report on police use of force during that time. And during that, we saw that, in all 50 states and DC, that, there's a failure to comply with international law and standards on the use of lethal force by officers here in the U.S. There's 9 states and DC again that have no laws in the use of lethal force by law officers. 13 states have laws that do not comply with even the lower standards set by the U.S. Constitution around lethal force. So lethal force in the U.S. with the police departments is still a concern. It didn't go away then, and we're still, as we see now, grappling with that issue of use of lethal force with our police departments across the country. It's not one or two. It's totally across the country. The conversation is, about bad police. Roughly there's 680,000 or so sworn police officers across the country in some form or fashion. 680 roughly thousand. Even if you say 10% of that is bad, you're looking at 68,000 or so individuals that are policing communities across the country that are bad. And so we can't say that, it's a small amount of individuals that are doing this. That small amount with that huge of a number affects millions of people in this community. And so we have to continue to push and get that done. So during the Michael Brown killing in Ferguson, there was a rise of a group, an organization called Black Lives Matter, which became a huge slogan as well in the country that became controversial. Individuals say all lives matter, and from that spurred Blue Lives Matter as a pushback of the Black community saying, hey, we are human as well, and our lives matter. Because, over this time, it never seemed that it did. If you can get shot and killed by the police that's supposed to protect and serve, and nothing happens to this police. Many times they would say, I feared for my life, and instantly charges would be dropped. He looked like he had a gun, but it was a cell phone. Everybody else saw it was a cell phone, but the police officer thought it was a gun, shot and killed him. Charges are dropped, or there is no charges. So Black Lives Matters was not just an organization, but it's a movement that has been continued to go on, as you see today, which really sparked during the Ferguson uprising that took place in 2014. And so fast forwarding to today, where we see, roughly 2 weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, where George Floyd, individual in Minneapolis, was shot and killed. Was choked by the police officer. And so, many times we do talk about them being shot and killed. But there's you have Eric Gardner as well, that was choked by the police officers that, you know, this thought of being able to, you know, to act like they're a wrestler, you know, and want to slam individuals to the ground and hold some way. And so George Floyd, as we see, had a knee in his neck for 8 minutes, 46 seconds. And the life was taken out of this man's body by the hands of the police, again, that was supposed to serve and protect. And so, you know, I got to ask the question the other week about, you know, why was this different? What's different about it? You know, I just think it's the moment. You know, it's really because of cell phones. You know, if it wasn't for the video, this would have easily been swept under the rug. This would easily have been a case of the police saying he was resisting arrest and that it was, you know, a 2-day investigation and it would have been gone. But luckily, you know, again, we had this invention of cell phone cameras that we were able to get this video, you know, and able to show and prove again that this man was not doing anything. He was already cuffed. He was not putting up a fight. And for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, this police officers and his colleagues sat there and took the life from this man. And so we have this movement that now that, you know, again, we're fed up. The community has seen it once again. We're at this moment that, you know, to literally hear him cry for his mom, literally ask, you know, say he can't breathe. And this other human being, not even a human piece in him, to step off of him for a second, not even just a second, to let him get a breath and then get back anything. So it's just a breaking point, you know, and so that's where we are. That's how I think we got to this point, you know, that folks just couldn't take it no more. And they went to the streets. And here in America, you have the right to peaceful protests, as you do in other parts of the world. And so that's what the people did in Minneapolis and other cities across the country and around the world, began to peaceful protest to bring attention to this situation, to start asking for and demanding changes in the laws here in the U.S. and in these cities and these police force, that we can no longer continue to let this happen. You know, there was a list I saw of killings that took place since Mike Brown with police. And it's, you know, we've had something 1 or 2 every year for the past 6 years, you know, and so how can we continue to say it's a figment of our imagination? These individuals were bad or what have you, when it's continuously happened. And then we have, you know, at the same time, in the same time period, we had Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, to get her life taken again by the police with a no-knock warrant. They come in. You have an individual that is, I believe, a licensed gun owner. He was protecting his home. And so the police come in and shoot and kill her in the home. And so, you know, that's going on simultaneously. We have George Floyd. So it just becomes a unfortunate great mix of emotion. And folks are just, you know, fed up and tired of how we are getting treated as Black Americans, you know, here in this country. And so that starts. And so now we're in about the 21 days of protests that have been going on since the killing of George Floyd. The police response to this has been good in some spots and despicable in other places. You know, the job of the police during protests is facilitate, protect, and de-escalate. To facilitate those protests, allow those protests to take place, those peaceful protests to take place, protect the protesters from agitators, protect them from distractors. And then if there are situations, they are to de-escalate those situations. They are to bring that down and be able to control those situations, not tear gas peaceful protesters, not shooting them with rubber bullets, you know, not attacking the journalists that are out reporting on these protesters. We've had journalists that have been injured, you know, and hitting eyes, hitting the neck, etc., from doing their job of reporting on peaceful protesting, which is a huge difference from what I saw when we were on the ground in Ferguson just 6 years ago. The media, the journalists were able to do their job. They were able to roam the streets. They were able to talk to individuals. They were able to report what was going on. And what has been seen, at least what I've seen and been able to track during this time, is that that's a huge difference from Ferguson to today. And it's taken place on different cities across the country where the police have been attacking journalists for doing their job. And so not only are the peaceful protesters under attack, our journalism is under attack, our media is under attack. And so I think all of this just continuously to add to that pot of why folks are still in the street 21 days later, right? They're still out trying to make a difference in communities across this country. And so we have to give them respect. We have to continue to allow them to peacefully protest and do what they can and lawfully can do and should be doing. And so Amnesty's demands are asked coming out of this. We are looking, for a change in police force. We are advocating for what's currently in our Congress. It's called the Peace Act, which looks at curbing the police use of force and not having that as their first go-to, but actually their last result to go to in any situation as well. And so we're advocating for the Peace Act and changes in those in not only federally but in state-based legislation as well on how police forces take place. Also, there is a huge push around or conversation about defund the police. And so as we talk about defund the police, there are communities or sections of the communities are looking to abolish the police. Amnesty is not at the point of abolishing the police, but there should be reforms. How do we reallocate some of those funds that police force has that can now fund community-based organizations that's helping to do work in communities? How can we reallocate that money to go to youth programs that's going to keep young people off the streets, give them summer jobs? How are we going to defund by reallocating to mental institutions that we now can have individuals, police, instead of going to situations that is a proven mental situation, but sending out those mental health workers that can de-escalate that situation, so we don't have police going in and then their only recuse is to pull out their gun and shoot the individual that may be having a particular episode. And so defunding is looking at reallocating those funds. Police officers or police forces should be able to still function on a reduced budget and still be able to do their job of protecting and serving, because we will have those other pieces in place that will help the community as well. So I'll stop there. And most definitely I'm open and ready for questions as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coverson. He was Mr. Coverson. He serves as the End Gun Violence Campaign Manager for Amnesty International USA. You can post your questions on the comment section of the live broadcast of this talk. And now I'll pass the mic to Mrs. Marion Gray-Hopkins. She's a social activist. Following the killing of her 19-year-old son, Gary Hopkins Jr., in November 1999 by 2 police officers. He was totally unarmed. I'm saying it again one more time. And I'm really eager to hear her testimony.
Absolutely. And I'd like to thank Mr. Coverson, too, for his comments. And I'd like to thank Amnesty International for this opportunity to share Gary with everyone that is listening. I want to start by humanizing Gary. A lot of times when our loved ones are murdered, the first narrative comes from law enforcement, and they dehumanize our loved ones. So I want to start off by humanizing Gary and telling the world who Gary was. Gary was not just that young Black 19-year-old man that was murdered on November 27th, 1999, but he had 19 years of life. And Gary was a very fun-loving, happy-go-lucky person. Gary was the youngest of 4 children. Gary was a nurturer. Gary was very protective of his family, very much protective of his sisters who were older than he, but he was very protective of them. Gary was a mentor to his peer group. Gary was the one who kept unity within his peer group. Gary was an aspiring rapper. Gary was a comedian. He loved to play jokes on folks. Gary used to love to dance. Gary would perform for the family. Loved himself some Tyra Banks, the supermodel Tyra Banks. His whole entire room was a mural of Tyra Banks. He loved snickerdoodle cookies. Gary was an all-around great kid, and he was a great human being. Gary was a college student. He was majoring in mass communications with a business minor. I want to go into Gary's story because I want the world to know that these recent police killings is nothing new. As mentioned, Gary was murdered on November 27th, 1999. Gary was murdered by the police just 16 days after I lost my husband to a very short bout with terminal bone cancer. In addition to Gary going to college, he worked a part-time job. When we lost Gary's father to bone cancer, he's having a very difficult time. At his part-time job, his supervisor was giving a dance at a local fire station and invited Gary to attend that dance because he knew Gary was struggling with the death of his father. Gary comes to me and he shares with me that he was going to attend this dance and he was going to invite his friends and some of his very close cousins to go to this dance with him. And my husband was a real snappy dresser, and he came to me that morning. He says, Mom, he says, he wasn't just my dad, but he was my best friend. He said, when I go to this dance tonight, he said, I'm going to wear all of my dad's clothes, but I need a dress shirt. So Gary went out that day and he bought a dress shirt. That night he dressed in all of his father's clothes. He brought along some of his very close friends and some of his cousins to this dance that was held at a local fire station, which was just minutes from our home. While in attendance at that dance, one of Gary's friends got into a verbal altercation with someone at the party. And as I mentioned, Gary was a mentor to his peer group, and Gary was a peacemaker that night that he was murdered. Gary broke up a verbal altercation between a friend of his and another party goer. At the end of that night, they were getting ready to leave the event. There were 3 carloads of friends and cousins that attended that dance with Gary. And Gary was in the first vehicle. There were 3 cars. Gary was in that first vehicle. And making sure that everybody was still intact and they had gotten into their cars, they were where he told them to go, because he always had to be that one to take charge. So that night he was in that vehicle. The window was down. Gary was sitting on the outside ledge of that vehicle with his legs dangling on the outside of that car. When a patrol car, an officer comes up and he blocks them from exiting the fire station. There was 2 exits to that fire station. There was one on the right side. There was one on the left side. Gary and his friends were on the left side where they were stopped and they were unable to leave. So that officer gets out of his patrol car with his gun already drawn. And he comes up to the ledge of comes up to the car where Gary's sitting on the ledge of the windowsill. And he puts that gun to Gary's head. He pulls Gary off of that car by the collar of his shirt, and he kind of spins Gary around when the second officer, who what we term as moonlighting that night at that event, makes one fatal gunshot wound to Gary's chest, killing him. That was an unnecessary kill. Again, Gary was the peacemaker that night. He had broken up in altercation, yet Gary loses his life. One would say during that time, well, let me just step back for just a moment. Prince George's County, Maryland was the #1 in the nation for killing for killing civilians. And that night was no different. So folks would say because Prince George's County, Maryland was the #1 in the nation for killing civilians, that I got an indictment for the officer, one of the officers. When I felt both officers were equally at fault for the death of my son, a decision was made by our state's attorney that they would indict the one police officer, the one who did the fatal shooting, but did not indict the one that precipitated the event. And through the course of the trial, I learned that these same two officers were partners. One was off duty and was moonlighting, or he was doing security at the event. When everything jumped off, he called his partner, who was also moonlighting at another location, to come. Gary knew both of these officers because Gary was scheduled to testify against these officers because he had witnessed excessive force being used by someone else in the community where we lived. So my feel is that Gary was executed that night. No different than we're seeing here 20 years later, that we went to trial. There was a week's worth of testimony that definitely showed that these officers should have been convicted, but there was no conviction. The judge says to us on that final day after closing arguments, "I've heard enough." He said, "I'll be back after lunch with my verdict," and he acquitted that officer on all charges. And that goes to show you that here we are 20 years later, and we, as Ernest talked about, we have video cameras now where people are videotaping, but they want us to believe that what we're seeing is really not what we saw, and that they have split seconds to make decisions when the first decision they make is to take the life of many times unarmed men and women, people dealing with mental illnesses, because Ernest talked about defunding and where does that money go? Let's allocate that money and put it back where it belongs. So there was no justice in my case. We should not have seen the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many, many others. There are over 1,000 people killed every single year at the hands of law enforcement here in the United States. These incidents that we're seeing that are being televised are not isolated incidents. You're talking 1,000. If I look at Gary, who had died 20 years ago, there have been over 20,000 killings. African Americans, people of color, are more than 3 times likely to get into an encounter with law enforcement and 2 times more likely than their counterparts to be murdered. So we've seen the uprising with Michael Brown and his death. We've seen the uprising with Eric Garner, who was the first to say, "I cannot breathe." We've seen the uprising now with George Floyd. And I think that now we're going to see a change. We as citizens of the United States, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Enough is enough. And I strongly feel that change is coming. Change is generally slow, but change is coming. I am reminded when I see, as we are here speaking now with Greece, I've had conversations with France. So we're mobilizing across this nation. This is becoming a global issue. And I am reminded of my son. One of his final college essays was, "It takes a village." And in that writing, he talks about it, people coming together if we want to demand change. And I'm happy to know that Gary is looking down on all of us and saying the village is finally coming together, and now is the time. And I'll close with that.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hopkins. We have lots of messages and questions that keeps coming up. At first, there are some messages of solidarity. Keep strong, guys. The world is listening. They're saying. There's a question. There has been a debate on this, a global, a universal debate. And could you explain, Mr. Coverson, could you elaborate a little bit, why do we use the slogan Black Lives Matter and not All Lives Matter?
Mm. Yeah, because in this moment, and even before, we need to be specific. You know, in saying that Black Lives Matter is not discrediting anyone else. But at this moment, when you look at statistics, you look at what's happening, we have to be specific in what we're asking for. And that's that Black Lives Matter. Over time, we have seen that it seemed as if they didn't matter. From if you look at throughout history and you look at individuals, you look at Black individuals in this country and what we had to continue to go through. it doesn't look like our lives mattered. With individuals getting shot and killed by the hands of the state, by police force, our lives did not matter. Our educational systems in our communities are not as the same as other communities. So our, Black lives matter. And so I think in it, by using that, we're getting specific in what we mean, what we need, and the message we're trying to get across.
Mm-hmm. Can I make a comment? I just want to comment to that. And I often hear I get that same question. And well, all lives matter. And I respond to that this way. I will say, when Black lives matter, then all lives will matter.
Mr. Coverson, can you explain a little bit on the Peace Act? People want to know some things more about that. And what do you think are the chances of this Peace Act actually being passed? Yeah.
So the Peace Act would has a couple different layers into it, but it would end the the chokehold on the federal level. It would also require that lethal force be the last resort in non-life-threatening situations. And it would also require states to also adopt pieces of this same Peace Act in their states. And if not, then they would face repercussions, per se, from the federal government in regards to their funding that they receive from the federal government as well. And so it's currently we looked that it should pass the House of Representatives. We may have challenges in the Senate side. As we know, the Senate side has been the barrier to a lot of stuff, a lot of the progressive movements that we're doing, from gun violence prevention legislation to many other pieces. So we see there may be a fight in the Senate side, but as we've been saying, hopefully this moment would help get some of these pieces passed this time around.
The same listener, Nicole, asks also, should we be rallying in support of non-federal solutions instead?
I think we're doing both. I think, in specifically, like say in Louisville last week, they just passed the Breonna Taylor's law in the city of Louisville, which now bans no-knock warrants, which is what precipitated to Breonna being shot and killed. And then in New York, there was some legislation, or the governor signed some legislation that changed, some police procedures there, provided funding for organizations and communities in New York as well. So we're doing both. We have members and the community is working on state-based work as well as the federal base. So we are doing both at the same time.
Ms. Hopkins, Mr. Coverson said that thank God we have this invasion of the cell phones. You've said that you were sick and tired of being sick and tired, but how disappointing is for you, 6 years after the case of Eric Garner, listening another African-American crying, "I cannot breathe," in the hands of a white policeman?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what the question was that came out of that.
How disappointing it was for you, 6 years after the case of Eric Garner, listening another African-American crying, "I cannot breathe," in the hands of a white policeman? It
was very, very heartbreaking to actually have that happen. I'm very close with Eric Garner's mother, Gwen Carr, and I felt for her, as I felt for all families that have lost loved ones, not only just to chokeholds, but tasers and gun violence. I mean, it breaks your heart. It's very difficult for us as family to wake up every single day. When we hear these stories day after day after day, and I believe it's every 17 hours or less now, someone is murdered at the hands of law enforcement. We are re-traumatized every time we hear these stories, because we know that there can be legislation passed that could stop these unnecessary and senseless killings of our loved ones.
Mm-hmm. Question to both of you from another listener. He or she says, we saw a lot of incidences of police violence and killings of Black people, not only now with the Trump administration, but also throughout Obama administration. Did Obama administration made any steps toward justice to the Black community? This is for both of you, whoever wants to answer first.
And I'll start. I mean, I know that I had an opportunity to visit the White House on many occasions, not directly with the president, but I know that your brother's keeper, for example, there were different programs that were implemented to try to bring necessary change. They were batted down at every time there was something brought to the table. It was batted down and would not be passed, just because I believe because of Obama, because of the color of his skin, not just because he was a Democrat, but again, because of the color of his skin. So there were things out that he was trying to do, but he did not have the support, of the Republicans. And this is not just a Republican issue or Democrat, it's a human rights issue. And so we need to be pushing legislation and changes of policies, et cetera, no matter what the color of your skin or whether you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, right wing, left wing, it doesn't matter.
Mr. Coverson, how difficult is struggling for human rights under such an administration? It's a current administration.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but I mean the thing is, it's always been a challenge. This has been a marathon and not a sprint. We've been doing this fight for years. I mean, sometimes we have quote friendly administrations that we're able to get things moved through with less resistance. And then we have, administrations where we have, huge resistance. And so, the fight continues. I mean, right now it is difficult because you don't know where things are going to happen from a day-to-day basis with this administration and where this administration is going to land on certain issues. And so, we have to continue that push and just know that, at the end of the day, we will succeed and we will win. And that is, it's not going to be a quick fix at all, because you're looking at, 400 years of this mentality, of this systematic racism that is going on as well.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to add to that. I think it's important that the people know the power is in us. I know we often have our leaders that we bring in, that we put into place and that we vote in. But I think the power is in the people, and I see the numbers of the people is very, very powerful at this particular time. So the time is now.
There's another question for Mr. Coverson. Christina wants to ask if you, Mr. Coverson, think that police violence has only to do with racism, or if it is also a way for the states to enforce their policies to the people, and especially to the working class and the poor.
Good question. I do. I mean, I think I think race plays a huge factor in the situation. You have police officers that treat in the same type of scenario where you see, case in point, you had Dylan Roof in South Carolina, went into the church, prayed with the individuals at the church, shot and killed, I think like 8 individuals in the church. He gets away, drives off, the police catch up with him, arrest him with no incident, and then stops at Burger King and gets him a meal before taking him to jail. You have this case in point now, George Floyd has no weapon, supposedly passed a counterfeit $20 bill, and you got 4 or 5 cops around him, and he dies in that situation. And so the change in the factor there is the color of the skin. And so you have to look at, when these situations constantly happen, there is a piece of it that is a race piece of it, that individuals may not, may have not, interacted with Black people, don't live in Black communities, look at the media and see all of these other things, this characteristic of what Black men are, Black women are. And so it's looked at less than. And so they're able to do these things to them. And the system is not going to punish them for that. They're going to get off. You know, they're not going to be charged. They're able to say they fear for their life. And so it constantly goes back to a race situation in many of these cases, because you can't have a police officer dealing with two similar situations and one of the persons come out alive and get a freaking Burger King meal, and the other individuals dies and gets choked to death because of, you know, just because of who he is. So it's a major race issue in the situation.
Ms. Hopkins, what's your take on this?
Was that a question addressed to me?
What's your take on the same question? If this is only a thing of racism, but also a way for the state to enforce their policies to the working class and the poor?
Yeah, I really don't have. I think Mr. Coverson did an excellent job at describing exactly what we're going through. I mean, I used that very example of Dylan Roof just the other day. But it's very apparent when the numbers don't lie. When it says 2 times more likely to use lethal force against a person of color, and when you're 3 times more likely just to be stopped because of the color of your skin, whether you're walking while black, talking while black, you're eating while black, it doesn't matter. There's definitely this huge disproportionate and a very huge disparity in how a person of color is treated than their counterparts.
Mm-hmm. Another listener says that listening to you, Marion, it reminds him or her a lot of the case of Magda Fisa, the mother of Pavlos Fisas, a hip-hop producer and singer that was killed by a neo-Nazi political party / criminal organization, the Golden Dawn in Greece. Here she wants to express an admiration for you, Marion, and wants to ask, how does you find the energy to overcome the trauma? There's another listener that asks, Fotini asks, does this pain ever heal?
It never heals. It gets better to cope, but it never goes away. And there are always triggers. Birthdays, you see friends getting married, you know, and I look at his siblings, and I look at other people across the country that have lost their loved ones. And as I mentioned, it re-traumatizes you. The pain never goes away. But I feel my healing comes through my support of other mothers. I started an organization along with Deshola Dawkins, whose son, Timothy Dawkins, was murdered by community violence. And we started an organization because as we go through our journey to healing, it heals us to be able to minister, if you will, to other mothers and other loved ones across the country.
Mm-hmm. Another one for you, Marion. John says that he was listening to Angela Davis the other day about defunding the police and the importance of this demand as a first step towards limiting police brutality and giving state money to public schools and public services to raise the standard of living in Black communities. What's your opinion on this?
And I wholeheartely agree with that. I know a lot of the things that were outlined by Mr. Coverson when he went through his list, I had the same thing. Defunding means to me taking the money that they're allocating towards militarizing police force across this country and reallocating that money to community-based programs for the youth, eliminating resource officers that are building school-to-prison pipelines and having counselors that can work with these youth that are having issues, allocating that money to mental health, because we know that a lot of the folks that are murdered by the hands of police and law enforcement have mental health issues. So reallocating those funds to programs that will help, you know, with this issue.
Mm-hmm. Despina touches a little bit the issue of police accountability. She says that there were police officers who were got free from the justice system, even though they have murdered a person. And she asks, how can they return to their work and why do not get fired? And how a community who loses a member reacts to that? Because there were lots of cases like this in the past?
I think the way the community reacts is that we get on board and we all gather together and galvanize and mobilize together to make the necessary changes that are needed to stop the killings. And I think, and I spoke earlier about the power is in the people. We're seeing people mobilize now, because you will have small groups of people within respective cities, within respective states, and you may get some really minor changes. But I think when we mobilize as the people, both nationally and internationally, I think we will definitely work towards getting the changes necessary, and not ask for changes, but demand changes.
Mm-hmm. You can keep on posting questions on the comment section of the broadcast. Mr. Coverson, what's your take on police accountability, and what's going to change this time?
Totally agree. Totally agree with Ms. Marion said. I mean, I think, we have to continue to push. I mean, I think this moment, just feels a little different than previous moments, right? It feels that we are on the brink of some real change this time around. And I think it's going to be both federally, it's going to have to do federal as well as, local. I think it's going to be changes on both sides. And I think we have the folks, the members, the people in the communities that are pushing and ready for change. I mean, like I say, we're at 21 days or so of continued protests. And individuals are really committed across the globe to make these radical changes within the system that has continued to oppress Black folks here in the U.S. So I think, and the police I think it's just the start of it. I think there's going to be continued change in all of the situations that has been adversely affecting our communities, from education to health, etc. So I think this is just really the start of some great movement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Over the past few weeks, there was a lot of counter conversation about the looting that went along with the revolt, and there were many media, many journalists, many politicians that tried to drive the conversation away, to turn the conversation away. What's your answer? What's your take on this, Ms. Hopkins?
I don't condone what transpired. I don't condemn it either. People want to be heard. And I think they used that as a way for their voices to be heard. In my opinion, personally, I don't agree with it, but again, I don't condemn it. But people took that as an opportunity. They had been oppressed for so long. Many saw that as an opportunity to get what they are unable to get. They're not making enough money. They don't have the right jobs. And so they took that as that opportunity. Somebody posted a video, and I can't remember the name of the young lady who, broke this down for us as to people are talking about what they did, but didn't get into the why they did it. Mm-hmm. And I think that resonated with me, and that we need to dig into why did they do it? They focus again on what they did, but why were they doing it? What caused them to do, and why did they do what they did? Needs to be the focus.
Mr. Coverson?
Yeah, totally agree. And we have to look at that why, what's going on. I mean, I think in a big piece too that hasn't gotten a lot of the media push to, of the agitators or individuals that came in communities that started a lot of this, that weren't part of that community, or those communities that helped to start, some of this quote looting that was taking place. But again, the underlying bigger question, as Ms. Marion said, is why did individuals feel the need to do that? As I think we spoke about earlier, how COVID has affected Black communities, 10 times worse than it has other communities. So just another piece of pressure on folks' shoulders, and then to turn around and dealing with that. And then you get George Floyd, and you see this actual video, and then you hear Breonna Taylor. It's like, how much can people take?
Right.
You know, they can only take so much that they're going to have to respond. And so I think all of this is just response to all of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Given the way that Trump administration handled the situation, United States of America present a picture of a dichotomized nation or of a falling empire. Is this accurate, in your opinion? Mr. Coverson?
Ask the question once again.
Given the handling of the Trump administration, there is this notion that the United States of America is a dichotomized nation or a falling empire. And I'm wondering if this is accurate, if this is the big picture of it's just an interpretation.
I think it's an interpretation. I don't think, you know, we have election this year. And so, you know, things could change, you know, at the end of the election process. But, you know, I don't think it's a falling nation. I don't think, you know, the empire is we're about to, you know, become anything different. I think once all of this is over, we would just be even greater as a country, because we will have then right some of the wrongs that have been taking place. We will have at the end of this fixed some of these systematic challenges that we've had over the years, and that, you know, all of us as, say, Americans will fully be, you know, recognized, respected, and held up as full Americans, and our human rights will be fully implemented at that time.
Mm-hmm. What do you say, Mrs. Hopkins, on that?
Well said, Mr. Coverson. That's what I say.
There has to be a question that an answer that you have to disagree between that.
We're on board. We're on the same page with all of this. That's my ally. Amnesty International is my ally.
Right.
There is a question that seems naive, but I guess this is pretty interesting and a good question, actually. Ellen asks, what can we as Greeks, in order to help? What can we do in order to help? People in Greece, people in Turkey, people in Italy, people in Spain.
I would say that, you know, continue to get educated on mm-hmm. the truth, right? You know, we have great media market that will give a certain picture of what's happening. But I like this conversation here to really get some good information on what's going on. So continue to educate yourself. And then in your own space, being able to hold your country to hold America accountable to its citizens. You know, how do we, you know, allow for that to happen if we're one human race, right, across the world, across the globe, that we allow and no one speaks up about it, you know? And so I think this is, again, with the advent of the camera and the cell phones and all that, the blinds are getting pulled off on what's actually happening here in the U.S. So I would just say education, continue to get educated, and then holding, you know, the U.S. to the standards that we hold, you know, everyone else up to as well.
And I would add to that it's an important, not just to focus here on the United States, but focus on your countries as well, and treat people not by the color of their skin, but mm-hmm. by who they are, by their character is very important.
Mm-hmm. Does any one of you two afraid that outside the African American community, these reactions, this interest of the times will faint when this case will be written off the social media?
Well, I'm going to say that I hope that it doesn't. I think that now is the time, and I don't like saying I am hopeful, but I'm going to keep hope alive. I think this particular case is the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm-hmm.
And I am hoping that this uprising and this mobilization, this global mobilization will continue until change comes. And I think it's important that we're talking about a lot of changes that's going to be implemented, but then through this, there has to be accountability. And I think as we move forward and we make these changes, that's going to be the key. That's going to be the key to see if we're going to be holding, these officers, law enforcement officers, accountable to the actions that we're looking to implement.
Mm-hmm. What do you say, Mr. Coverson? After the, do we reduce this revolt and the much needed change to a hashtag on social media or to some social corporate responsibility demonstration?
Yeah. As Ms. Marion said, I will be hopeful, or I think we can move. I think I hope not. Let's say that. I hope not. I hope that it doesn't go back to, like you say, become a hashtag, become a mark in history that folks talk about, 10 years later to their kids and grandkids and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But for this moment, again, it seems really different. And you've seen a lot of immediate change and a lot of immediate momentum that has taken place. And, I think with the election that we have later this year, I think it will continue to bubble. It's going to continue to boil. And so I think this year for 2020, it's not going to turn into just a hashtag or a blip on the screen. It's really going to continue. The momentum will continue, and mm-hmm. folks will stay up, because we have the world looking at it now, and going back to the question previously about what can folks do, say in Greece, hold us accountable, even to the protesters, say, hey, what happened? What's going on? You're off the streets now, but what's the changes that's happened? So even giving us that outside pressure to hold us accountable, that, we in Greece have vested in this to get on this system and listen, and we've been following you, so don't let us down, kind of thing as well.
And one of the things I wanted to add to that, that has really opened my eyes up, and I think that this is going to be ongoing. I don't think it's going to stop. Is to watch the very young children, the parents that are bringing their children, and through the interviews that you hear them say, I have a little one, and I want my grandchildren and I want my great-grandchildren to be a change, and they're bringing them out. So I think that too, to me, sends a strong message that it's not going away, because they're looking like I'm passing this on. And I often say to the younger folk, I said, we have gone through this. I've gone through this for, over 20 years. There have been a lot before me. We're talking 400 years of oppression, and we're still oppressed in many, many ways. And I was like, well, those that before me have built the foundation for change. And so I often say that I've built the foundation, and I'm passing the baton on. And I looked at those young children that are there and their parents, and they're passing that baton on to them. And I really think that we're in this for a good fight. And I think we're going to see the change. I'm going to keep hope alive.
Yeah.
Doesn't end anytime soon. One question to Ernest. Can you tell us more about the End Gun Violence campaigning that you're leading?
Sure. So I run our End Gun Violence campaign. We launched it in 2018. We did a real thorough report in regards to gun violence, and it covers both community violence, or day-to-day violence that take place in communities across the country, to suicide, domestic violence, and a portion of it is around police use of force as well. And so in that campaign and information that we revealed, the discrepancies in gun violence across the country, of the highest rate. Many times you hear about the mass shootings, but suicide is the highest rate of gun usage in murders or deaths in the country, is through suicide and the use. Women as well is I think it's 7 times more likely to be murdered in a home that has a weapon from their domestic partner. And so the statistics are there to show that gun violence is a challenge as well. And so we've been working both in communities as well as legislatively to get some of that change, from doing background checks to requiring licenses. I'm trying to stop legislation. There's been some movement across the country in some states to get campus carry, where individual students can carry guns on campuses, in college campuses, carry guns without licenses. And then it's also stand your ground laws that we've been pushing back on as well. And so we've been doing legislative work in regards to fixing, adding, and or stopping laws federally and state-based that will help to curb gun violence. But then also we've been working directly in Black and brown communities and lifting up those voices and organizations that's been doing this work way before Amnesty started doing it. There have been organizations that's been doing groundbreaking work in their communities to curb gun violence, but they don't get the national attention. They don't get the big funds that, national nonprofits and organizations get. And so we've been leading an effort as well and working with partners to make sure those voices are at these tables in DC, making sure that they are getting highlighted and being able to get some of those funds that are getting floated through this gun violence prevention movement as well. So we've been doing that piece as well. And, as we started, that's how, I met Ms. Marion. We were highlighting, mothers that have had to go through this scenario of their child being shot and killed, either by the hands of police or even just communities as well. We had a great partnership and work with Hydea Pendleton's mom that's here in Chicago that was shot and killed by, just a random shot and killed after performing at President Obama's last inauguration. And she came home and took finals. She was in high school. They was at the park hanging out and got hit and killed by guns. So we've been highlighting those voices to a national stage as well. So that's what we've been doing. The campaign still continues. We've, did some switching according to this COVID situation and changing up some of our objectives and how now, even though we have this pandemic, the pandemic of gun violence still continues. And a lot of these community-based organizations I spoke of is now getting defunded because many of our states and local municipalities are redirecting that money to deal with COVID, and dealing with how do they, balance their budgets now and change their direction. And so we're continuing to push a lot of that and working to get some federal legislation passed called Break the Cycle Act, which will provide federal monies to these community-based organizations so they are not dependent on states and cities, which, it flows with the wind. But if you get this federal money that's specifically there to help these organizations continue to do the work they're doing on the ground that way. So, yeah.
Okay. Europe poses a strong, deep question to you, Mr. Hopkins. Do you believe that this revolution taking place will bring the fall of patriarchy?
I didn't hear the last part. The fall
of patriarchy. Patriarchy. The male dominance in the society.
Do I think that it's going to bring a male dominance?
No. If it's going to bring the fall of male dominance in the society, and what do you think on the concept of the direct democracy?
Well, I will say that I would say women stand strong. We are standing out in the forefront. I don't think that it will break down the male dominance, but I think that women will get their due respect for the work that we do.
Fair enough. We saw here in Greece a few days ago, and in the rest of the world, a great video by John Oliver, the comedian and host of Last Week Tonight, also discussing whether the police can change or if it needs a dissolution and rebuilding. He also mentioned a case of a state in the US which took the decision to dismantle the police and rebuild it from scratch. What are your thoughts on this? Is it possible? Is it something that needs to be discussed, the total rebuilding of the police?
I don't have the answers, and then Ernest, I'll let you speak. I mean, I really don't have the answers, but I know there's some pretty smart people out here, and I think that, you know, where it needs to be dismantled, I think that they will have the right people at the table to discuss what that will look like if they were to do that. But we know that we're dealing with systemic racism across this nation and beyond, and that if nothing more than reform, it needs to happen, because we've seen all of the cases over the years and continue to see the cases where there is no justice. So we do know that reform is required. Dismantling, again, will take discussions with the appropriate stakeholders at the table, and then implementation would go from there.
Okay, I have a couple of more questions before we conclude. Mr. Coverson, will Colin Kaepernick, who is an Amnesty's Conscience Award winner, find the team at NFL eventually?
He should.
Right, hilarious. Hopefully he will. I mean, hopefully they, you know, it's going to come together. Especially now the NFL has come to its senses and made its statement over the past couple of days. So hopefully this will now open the door that Brother Cap can come back and play ball again.
Mm-hmm. And Thanasis is asking, this is a long question, I have to read it. Is there any criminal law or any article in the criminal code criminalizing especially the murder or the attacks out of racist or discriminatory motive, even if it is committed by the state's bodies?
So there isn't law specifically. I mean, there are certain hate crime laws that are there, that are implemented, and that specifically many times are for civilians per se, that are held, you know, that get charged with the hate crime laws. I have not seen it used in police shootings as a law that they've been brought upon or been charged against, you know, charged with for police. I think that would be a very hard piece to prove as well, because it is the police and just the whole mentality around police and protecting the police as well. But there are hate crime laws that the country has, both federally, particularly federally. Some states have a hate crime law as well, that way that can be implemented according to the crime.
Okay, can you summarize one more time about the Peace Act and the legislation proposed? We have questions that.
So the Peace Act would provide. It's a couple things in the Peace Act. So it will provide for the elimination of chokeholds by the federal government, the federal officers. It will provide funding, or it will provide incentives for states to also implement many of the laws of the Peace Act on the state level. If not, they will be reduce or lose some of their federal funding as well. And it also enacts that use of lethal force would be the last result or the last resort for police officers to use versus the first. So they will have to go through some type of systematic trail to say the reason they used this use of force was legit, that they was the reason why they did it, not they got out the car and automatically shot the guy, the kind of thing. So those three pieces, amongst some other things, that gets really into the weeds. But those are like the three major parts of the Peace Act that will be enacted if it's passed.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to also mention some legislation that we had years ago. There's an organization called On Us Inc. that's led by a young woman, Gerald Sanders, who, after the uprising in the Michael Brown case, got the meeting of the minds together and drafted up some proposed legislation. And we're going to look at resurrecting that, because it looks at every possible loophole where law enforcement officers get away with deadly murders of killing, predominantly brown and black folks. But it's called the acronym is URLEIA, which stands for Uniform Reporting Law Enforcement Improvement Act. And so we're going to be resurrecting that, and it probably aligns very well with the Peace Act and some of the pieces of the legislation there. So would ask that folks be, on the lookout for that coming up as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that sums it up pretty well, that the use of lethal force must be the last resort.
Yeah.
But Mr. Coverson, there's another sports question / proposition. They're saying, why doesn't Amnesty International ask Giannis Antetokounmpo to become an ambassador for social justice?
Ask who?
A perfect example.
To ask who again?
Giannis Antetokounmpo, the NBA star, the Greek NBA star.
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I will take that back and to our entertainment folks and say, hey, we need to put a call out and see if he's willing to step into the role. Most definitely, we'll get him on there. Y'all can urge him as citizens there. Urge him to reach out to us. We'll be reaching out to him. So put some pressure on him for us.
Okay. Okay, Mrs. Gray-Hopkins, Mr. Coverson, Marion, Ernest, thank you very much. Your testimonies were of great value. They created a wide space of contextualizing what we're seeing every day on our screens. We feel for you as much as we can. We raise our fists with your community. We support your cause. We stand in solidarity with your community. Thank you very much for your participation, for the nice things you've said, for the valuable knowledge that you've shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε και όλους εσάς που μείνατε συντονισμένοι. Ελπίζω ότι βρήκατε αρκετά ενδιαφέροντα αυτά τα οποία υπόθηκαν. Μπορείτε να ακολουθήσετε τα social media του Ελληνικού Τμήματος της Διεθνούς Αμνηστίας για να υπογράψετε το cause που υπάρχει και για την περίπτωση του Black Lives Matter, αλλά και να ενημερωθείτε και για τα υπόλοιπα causes τα οποία υποστηρίζει το Ελληνικό Τμήμα της Διεθνούς Αμνηστίας, αλλά και η Διεθνής Αμνηστία παγκοσμίως. Μπορείτε να κατεβάσετε δωρεάν και μια έκδοση, την τελευταία έκδοση του Ελληνικού Τμήματος για τα ανθρώπινα δικαιώματα την επόμενη μέρα της πανδημίας. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Νομίζω το μήνυμα της σημερινής βραδιάς δεν μπορεί να είναι διαφορετικό από το Black Lives Matter. Να είστε καλά και ελπίζουμε αυτή η αλλαγή για την οποία συζητάμε εδώ και 90 λεπτά επιτέλους να έρθει. Καλό βράδυ.